So in the last video, we demonstrated the second method of calculating the width of our benches. So off camera, Steve and I had a bit of a discussion as to which of the two methods we were going to keep, and we decided to flip a coin. Actually, not really. We decided not to reload any other files, so we went with the last method.
Which is the one where we create attributes to control.
That's right. So
Sweet.
we used the simple theorem to calculate the distance between 2 points. Excellent. So in this video, which is going to be a very simple video and requires no whiteboarding, we are going to copy all of our bleachers that are on that first column around to all of the other columns. And then after that, some shaders.
Just some very simple shaders,
Yeah.
just some Vex super materials with some basic color.
And then that'll pretty much wrap up the bleachers.
Yeah, we're going to then in the next video deal with creating
Revisit
the
the
support
stadium.
poles
Yeah.
for the stadium. But yeah, for the actual benches and the bleachers themselves, it's going to be wrapped up.
Excellent. Okay, well, let's go ahead and copy them out.
This is going to be so nice and simple now that we've got all of these guys set up for just a single row.
And you guys have seen the maps that we're going to use
Quite a few times now.
Yeah, quite a few times.
So I'm going to wire the output of our copy benches for rows into a new copy by right-clicking and creating a copy SOP, enter, and enter to drop that into our network. I'm going to rename this to copy columns. And we're simply going to set our number of copies to be equal to the number of columns that we have. So I'm going to reference the columns parameter up on our asset. And with transform cumulative checked, we can rotate in Y based on the angle between each of these, and we'll end up with all of our benches copied around. And we've seen that to calculate the angle between each of these, we take 180 degrees and divide it by the number of columns that we have. So there we go.
Look at that.
Fantastic. So we're going to take this, and I'm going to merge this in with the rest of our stadium just before we scale our stadium up based on overall height and depth, because we want our benches to be affected by that also. So let's take copy columns, and let's create a merge that's going to be between this material and our overall depth height X form, and then we can wire copy columns into that merge.
Okay.
So I'm going to just make a little bit of space, and right click on the output of the material and create a merge SOP, which I'll name to merge bleachers and stadium. And then I'll take the output of copy columns and wire that into our merge. So if we bring our visibility down, we have everybody, and then everybody gets scaled by the overall height and depth, and then everybody's made to sit on the floor object. So that's everything in terms of geometry for these guys. Now let's just deal with creating the shaders for them. And as mentioned a second ago, they're just going to be simple Vex super materials.
Okay.
So I'm going to jump inside our bleachers shop, and I'm going to create a new Vex super material. And I'm going to name this guy to m_bleacher seats. So that's going to be assigned to our boxes that we created for the seats of our bleachers. And I'm going to set the diffuse to a sort of mid-grey colour, around, I don't know, 0.75. And I don't want any specular because I want these to be a matte surface, so I'm going to drop the specular down very low. And then let's take our diffuse rough and specular rough, boost the diffuse rough a very small amount, and the specular rough by quite a significant amount. And that's going to create a very basic shader for our seats. Now let's turn around and create a shader for the seat tubes. So I'm going to create another Vex super material, enter to drop that into our network. I'm going to rename this to m_bleacher seat poles. And on this guy, a diffuse colour of a sort of dark grey brown. So let's find a sort of dark grey brown.
Okay.
A specular colour of a, I don't know, something not too dark, because we want them to have a little bit of specularity, but nothing too extreme. Because
Not quite that dark. There we go.
You're thinking around 0.2?
Yeah.
That sounds good to me. And, yeah, let's boost our specular off just slightly. Almost as if they were kind of metal that's been scratched up a little bit, so it's going to diffuse the specular highlight a little bit. I am going to turn around and change this over to a blend, since we're dealing with metal tubes. So that's our two very basic shaders. we can get those assigned, and we can then promote up some of the basic parameters up to our asset, and then we're done.
Okay, sounds good.
So let's find where we create our box and our tube for our bench. After our box, I'm going to right click and wire in a material SOP and enter to drop that into the network. For the material parameter, I'll bring up the browser, jump into our bleachers shop, and grab the m_bleachers seats, making sure to export a relative path.
We can go ahead and name that guy too. Bench material, or
yeah, bench seat material.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. And then we can take our tube, and before it's wired into the transform to create the second tube, I'm going to right click, create another material SOP, so left click to grab that, enter to place that into our network. And let's name this to bench tube material. And we can grab from the material parameter, add m_bleacher seat poles, and we've still got export relative path. And if we accept that, we can see that that gets applied. So I'm going to right click on our asset, bring up the type properties, we can promote up some of the shader parameters, and then we'll be done.
Okay.
So I'm going to right click, come down to type properties, that is off the bottom of the window there. And let's just resize this guy so we can see what we're doing. I'm going to jump over to the parameters tab. We've already got a folder for our stadium base. So let's create another folder for our benches, where I'm going to create the shading parameters for the top of the bench, and then I'll create another folder for our bench supports, which will be those tubes, and put parameters into that folder too. Actually, I'll create that folder now. So up under shaders, I'll create another folder called bench supports. So up under benches, we're going to grab from nodes, I'm going to jump inside our bleachers asset, down inside our bleachers shop network, inside our m_bleacher seats, and inside the shader folder, and we're going to grab our diffuse color, our specular color, our diffuse rough, and specular rough. Before I promote these up, I want to just double check that prefix, link name, and label are unchecked. Indeed they are in this case. And then I'm going to click on the right arrow to promote these over into our benches folder. And now I'm going to do the same for our m_bleacher seat poles. So open up bleacher seat poles, inside the shader folder, I'm going to grab diffuse color, specular color, diffuse rough, and specular rough, grab our bench supports folder, and promote these guys over by clicking on the right arrow button. And with that, if we accept this, and bring up our parameters for our asset, we now have inside our shaders folder, stadium base, benches, and bench supports for controlling the basic parameters of all of our shaders.
Very nice.
I'm just going to jump down and bring our visibility down here.
Now play with the parameters for a minute.
Sweet.
The good stuff.
So let's right click, bring up our parameters, and we can change things like the number of rows.
Very nice.
The number of columns that we have.
Oh yeah.
The inner radius. And you'll see that the length of our benches is all following along perfectly. Our height. Our depth. Fantastic.
Okay. Well, with that, that's pretty much everything we set out to accomplish in this video. In the next video, we're going to create the stadium's support beams. That'll be tubes that are going to run down up under each of the notched areas behind the stadium. And with that, that wraps up this video. Thanks a lot.